if you are considering a purchase or you're going to sell your home in North Carolina, the phrase due diligence or the two words due diligence will come up. And they mean a little bit different, something different than if you were talking about doing your due diligence on a property, which is investigations like inspections and that sort of thing. But the difference being in the state of North Carolina, there is a due diligence period. And it causes a lot of confusion for folks that come here from out of state. So I want to try to explain that a little bit and talk about what the difference is and how to understand it best. So when you're writing an offer on a home in the state of North Carolina, there are two areas in the contract where the buyer submits monies. Okay. I think that all of us are aware of what earnest money is. It's a good faith payment to show that you are serious about this offer and that you're making this offer in good faith. Okay, that's very typical in most states, and North Carolina is no different. However, there's also a due diligence period and a due diligence payment. And the due diligence payment is paid directly to the seller. It is non-refundable if you walk away. It is credited to you at closing. And it is you, the buyer, paying for time from the seller to do all of your inspections, investigations, appraisals, getting mostly through your mortgage process, looking at HOA docs, and anything else you want to look at. The state of North Carolina says you have the ability to inspect any and all, but you, the buyer, are paying for time. And it's a little arbitrary. And a lot of people think it's not very protective of the buyer. But what it does is it allows you the opportunity to walk away if you find something that's truly scary. So you found a home to purchase, you feel like this is your home, you write an offer with earnest money and due diligence money, knowing that the due diligence money is non-refundable if you walk away. And let's say you find something truly terrifying about a home. You find something very scary with structure. Maybe there's a big structural issue that could cost thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that due diligence period gives you the time to walk away, do your investigations, decide whether you want to walk away, and walk away. No questions asked, but you will lose your due diligence money. Now, I know it's a very confusing process or concept. It is a confusing concept, but the state of North Carolina wanted to give buyers an opportunity to do all the investigations and property inspections that they wanted without causing the earnest money to be in jeopardy. But at the same time, hold a buyer's feet to the fire, so to speak, if they were just one of those people that writes offers and walks away and there's no skin in the game. So for buyers, there is skin in the game. But you don't want there to be so much skin in the game that you aren't willing to lose that money if you find something that's going to be very costly for you. And for that reason, if you want to get all of your inspections done, if possible, through the due diligence period. I have a client that decided to do one more inspection past that due diligence period. They just are doing it for their knowledge only. They understand that. And that's what's happening here. And they have the right to do that. You can inspect all the way up to closing day if you wanted to. But your power of negotiations is during that due diligence period, because most sellers don't want their buyers to walk away. And it certainly does depend on the market. But most sellers don't want to go through this process again to find another buyer, go through the contractual process, inspections, showings, all of that. But at the same time, a buyer wants to have the ability to walk away if something big is found that the seller is not willing to repair. And for that reason, that due diligence period was created by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, and the due diligence period is in effect. So when I say due diligence, I'm talking about the due diligence period or the due diligence payment, not the broader term of, doing some due diligence on a home. It is a specific being in our contracts, and it dominates our contracts. The good thing about it is there's only one date. There's only one date that you have to remember. In many other states, there's a certain number of days for inspections and then a certain number of days to get back to about repairs, back and forth. None of that in North Carolina. It is one date, and it's the date that you get to ask for, request in your offer. And typically, we don't have a lot of issues with sellers not agreeing to the time frame you need. Sometimes we do have buyers and sellers that negotiate a bit on how much due diligence money is brought to the contract. Certainly that depends on market conditions because there is no set amount. But if it's a seller's market and you're in a bidding war with 5 other buyers, that due diligence fee might become very important within the negotiating process or the seller making a decision on which offer to accept. But if it is a buyer's market, it's a slower market. Sellers really, really, really want that buyer in the door. Buyers can get away with significantly less money. And so market conditions do play a part in how much is submitted. Obviously, if you're buying a $300,000 home, that is going to be a lower amount due diligence money than if you were buying a $3 million home, typically. But it is something that you and your agent decide on when you are writing that offer. All of the investigations that you do within a real estate transaction should be done within that due diligence period, if at all possible. But remember, time is of the essence. You want to try to get all of your inspections done inside that due diligence period. You want to try to get your appraisal done inside that due diligence period. Talk to your insurance agent about getting insurance. Sometimes some funky things come up on those. That is why we do all of that within the due diligence period. And in that way, if you need to negotiate for repairs, if you find a surprise, you have time to negotiate with that seller if you're inside the due diligence period. If I'm doing a 30-day transaction, 30 days to close, I'm probably going to try to run that due diligence period up to the 21 day mark. I want to try to give as much time as possible. 21 days is typically plenty. If we need an extension, we can certainly request it if some things need further investigation. But this is part of the process. The due diligence period does not have to be etched in stone, but it does need to be extended. And that due diligence period always ends at 5 p.m. on whatever day you and your agent decide within that offer. So these are all things that come up within the due diligence period, or questions that people ask me about the due diligence period. It truly is a little bit of a dizzying concept in the state of North Carolina, which is why it's so important to have an agent that really is understanding of the contract and also is going to walk through that house with you and look for red flags. If you see red flags in a home, it may be you may not want to put as much due diligence money into that offer because there are some questions about whether or not there's going to be some significant repairs. So this is how I operate with a buyer. Before we even talk about making an offer, I'm in that home with them looking for red flags so we can talk about those before the offer process occurs, because my clients know that any money in the due diligence section of that offer that is submitted is non-refundable if they walk away. So you want to make sure that you found a home that you want to live in, that you feel comfortable with the property, and it's something that you want to purchase. If you're just trying to, you know, blindly throw something at a dartboard and see if it'll stick, that can be very costly for you. So that is not how I love for buyers to operate. I like to work with buyers that are intentional and are understanding of the due diligence period as well as the due diligence money, and understand that it is non-refundable if they walk away. So that's what I wanted to talk about today with the due diligence period, due diligence money. It's not a common concept. And I don't think any other state in the country has a due diligence period and due diligence money like we do in the state of North Carolina. And it's interesting because South Carolina has over the years evolved into a different type of due diligence period, but we'll talk about that at another time. But there has been another state that has evolved into that. So find somebody that knows what the heck a due diligence period is, and just remember, due diligence money, except in very, very rare cases, and typically it has to do with some misrepresentation, due diligence money is never refundable. So don't believe it if someone tells you. In the state of North Carolina, it is never, ever, ever, ever refundable. All right, I'll talk to you all later. Have a great day. Thanks.